When we think of franchises from Hammer Studios, we think of Frankenstein and Dracula. The Curse of Frankenstein and Dracula were cornerstones for the revival of Gothic and British horror cinema in the late 50s. Their placement in Hammer Studios are what helped birth the Hammer horror brand. But there is another. What if I told you there was another great franchise of Hammer horror films? One with a better track record of hits rather than misses? One that feels like a forgotten middle child in this family of horror that produced some exceptional entertainment and scares. Not born out of classic literature like his brothers, but instead born out of pure cinematic influences. We're talking about The Mummy. In today's video, we'll look at the Mummy franchise from Hammer. 4 films not connected to one another, 4 individual tales of terror, and ask ourselves, is this Hammer's strongest franchise? On August 20th, 1958, Hammer and Universal International announced a joint finance and distribution agreement that would give Hammer remake rights to Universal's storied horror film library. The titles in these deals would be The Phantom of the Opera, The Invisible Man, and The Mummy. The Phantom of the Opera wouldn't be adapted by Hammer for another 3 years or so, and The Invisible Man sadly never got a production.
Go now. Go and destroy those who desecrated the tomb of our princess.
The Mummy would quickly go into production. While it is a remake of the 1932 classic with Boris Karloff, this film would not include the iconic Imhotep, but instead used the character of Karis from the sequels. The story of Hammer's Mummy would also borrow story elements and characters from the following films: The Mummy's Hand, The Mummy's Tomb, and The Mummy's Curse. That's a whole lot of mummies. The Mummy would follow a straightforward plot with British archaeologists in 1895 unearthing the tomb of Princess Ananka. Stephen Banning's findings would leave him in a catatonic state in a nursing home for 3 years. Upon coming out of his terrified state, he calls upon his son John, played by Peter Cushing. What happens next is the awakening of Karis, played by Christopher Lee respectively, and the deaths of those who disturbed the tomb of the princess. John Banning would survive the wrath of Karis after his wife confronts the mummy. Oh yeah, there's this forced subplot where John's wife Isabel resembles Karis's lover, Princess Ananka, but only with her hair down, obviously. For an out-of-nowhere love story, it saves John's skin more than once. The Mummy takes Isabel to the swamps where he's been hiding out in between the kills. This set piece is stripped solely from The Mummy's Curse. Once John's wife is safe, the mummy is shot down by the police and perishes in the swamp. The plot is nothing super engaging. You're just waiting for Karis to pop in, murder someone, and then exit. And those are the exciting parts of the film. It's slow to build, learn the lore of the world, the characters who reside, and the standout performance here is from Christopher Lee, who plays Karis. To have the majority of his body covered and work stiff, he has only his eyes to convey emotion. He's only shown once in the film outside of the wraps, though, in a flashback that details his love for Princess Ananka and his attempt to revive her from the dead with the Scroll of Thoth, before being captured, of course, and mummified to be her guardian for all eternity. Overall, The Mummy is a decent entry into this franchise. You get what you're expecting coming from this film, and Hammer doesn't try to reinvent the wheel whatsoever. 5 years later, we would get a follow-up from Terence Fisher and Jimmy Sangster's The Mummy, with Michael Carreras' The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. Carreras would be the film's director, screenwriter, and sole producer, with Alvin Rakoff co-writing the screenplay. So how did this hold up to Hammer's first outing with The Mummy? I actually think this is the better film. It's 1900 in Egypt, and the expedition for the tomb of Ra-Antef is a success. Mostly. French professor Eugene Dubois is captured and killed by the protectors of the tomb. don't get attached to these guys. They don't stick around long enough for us to really even care about them. The expedition crew consists of John Bray, an Egyptologist, and Annette's fiance, played by Ronald Howard, Fred Clark as Alexander King, an American promoter, George Pastel as Hashmi Bey, a representative of the Egypt colonial government. If this man looks familiar to you, he was the villain Mehmet Bey controlling Karis in the last film. Finally, there is Sir Giles Dalrymple, another Egyptologist, played by Jack Gwilym, respectively. Annette Dubois is heartbroken of her father's death, but she gets over pretty quickly when the expedition runs into the mysterious Adam Beauchamp, played by Terrence Morgan. Arriving in London, things take a turn for the worse with Alexander King's exhibition show of his newly found mummy has turned up missing. The mummified Ra Antef goes on a murderous rampage in one night for those who have defiled his grave. Some of the kills here feel safe due to Hammer's battle with the British Board of Film Classification. King is knocked unconscious and tumbles into a river, and Sir Giles is bludgeoned to death with an artifact. Originally, Sir Giles' death was to be from a broken back. In the scene, the mummy enters with intensity and eats a few bullets from Sir Giles before the man's back is to be snapped in two. But the BBFC wouldn't allow it. I do feel that the censors were being overzealous in these cuts. King's death was changed as originally he was strangled to death. Both deaths could have been used and seen off-screen through the works of lighting. But who am I to question the great British Board of Film Classification? If you want to see how petty they are with this film, John Trevelyan criticized the short scene in the script of a beetle seen crawling over a roasted pig. His reasoning for it to be cut? Sounds a bit disgusting. Well, excuse the screenwriters for trying to make us feel squeamish here in the theaters. A kill later in the film that I thought was the gnarliest was the death of Hashmi Bey. Upon seeing that the mummy is real and how he feels he's brought dishonor and shame to his ancestors, Hashmi begs for a painful death by Ra Antef. His wish was granted. Even I was shocked at this scene and thought, the balls on Hammer for this kill. Moving forward, we get to the meat of this mystery with the Adam Beauchamp guy. He has succeeded in seducing Annette and keeping her away from John. Although the mummy does come by for a visit and knocks Adam out before attempting to claim Annette's life. Ra Antef refuses to finish the job and leaves before the authorities can arrive. If you're wondering if this spicy fling is going anywhere between Annette, Adam, and John, well, I'm afraid to let you down, folks. Later, Adam confesses to Annette that he is the brother of Ra Antef and an immortal who has grown weary of living. The brother's father, Ramsay VIII, has placed a curse on Adam for the death of his older brother, before the king perished himself. The film's real villain now has a chance at rest in the afterlife. Adam commands his brother to kill Annette, but they are interrupted by John and the police. Fleeing, Adam loses his hand while trying to escape and commands his brother to kill Annette in the sewers. The mummy resists, and we see the two brothers square off. Ra Antef drowns his brother before causing the roof above them to collapse. Annette is saved, and we end our story with the curse finally broken. This film has a lot going on within the 88-minute runtime. There's a few laughs, some decent action, and great scares. This felt like a horror adventure that I would come to expect from a mummy movie and more. Despite the fight with the censors, I would gladly tell folks who want to watch Hammer's Mummy franchise to start with this film. It's fun and it has a bit of everything for everyone. The Mummy would return to the screens 3 years later with The Mummy Shroud in 1967. This would be the final film made at the famous Bray studio before Hammer moved their productions to L Street Studios. John Gillings would take the reins as director and co-write the film screenplay with Anthony Hines and Michael Carreras standing in as producer. How well did this third entry into the Hammer franchise do? Let's talk about it. Spoiler alert for those, but this will be the last time we see this bandaged monster that we've come to love in these films. More on that later. Our story opens with a flashback to the origins of our mummy, Prem, a manservant fleeing with the young pharaoh Katube after a coup on the palace killed the boy's father. Katube perished in the desert and is buried. To clear things up, our mummy here isn't the boy, but it's the manservant. Cut to the archaeologists in 1920 who have uncovered the tomb of Katube. Nothing more in this plot changes compared to the other two mummy movies, and why not? If it's not broken, don't fix it. The archaeologists uncover a tomb, take back a few artifacts and the bodies of two mummies, and in disturbing their arrest, they are cursed to be killed. So what makes this film different from the rest of the other mummy movies? Well, it's in the title of the movie. The mummy Prem can only be controlled when someone holds the shroud. That's about it. The film's villain is the same as in any of the other installments. Nothing new. The film wasn't given great reviews by both critics and the film's director. The Mummy Shroud, though, had some great moments. The kills in the film feel very on par with Hammer in its decade, especially the damage done to the mummy. He takes a lot of damage and manages to keep the power balance in his hands. Prem's demise is a fantastic way to destroy such an iconic monster. With the film's real villain dead and the female lead commanding Prem to destroy himself, we're given a close-up shot of the mummy crushing his own head. Movie magic really helps sell this demise well, with the mummy's head bursting with chalky substance, and the bone shattering leaves a very strong impression. Overall, it's not my favorite of the franchise, but again, this film also shows that really there can't be a terrible mummy film. You're going to walk away enjoying something out of this film. So remember back at the beginning of this video when I said that none of these films were based off of any form of literature and that The Mummy was created purely from cinematic influence? I kind of lied to you. 4 years after the release of The Mummy Shroud, Hammer releases Blood from the Mummy's Tomb and solidifies The Mummy as a franchise alongside Frankenstein and Dracula. The final entry would be an adaptation of Bram Stoker's The Jewel of the Seven Stars. I mentioned earlier that The Mummy Shroud would be the last time we see our iconic monster in wraps. So how can we have a mummy movie with no mummy and yet call it Blood from the Mummy's Tomb? Well, let's look into that. To preface, I have not read Stoker's tale that this film is based on. So this won't be a critique of does this adaptation do well to the source material. We've seen so far now how Hammer handles adaptation. So take with that as you will. Blood from the Mummy's Tomb starts out like every mummy movie we've covered so far. An expedition discovers strange artifacts in the tomb of Queen Tara, but their biggest discovery is unexpected. The body of Queen Tara is perfectly preserved, with the exception to her right hand being severed. With a ruby ring, the expedition returns their findings to London, with Professor Fuchs taking the ruby ring and the preserved body of Queen Tara to store in his cellar. The professor gives his daughter Margaret the ruby ring for a birthday present thereafter. Big pause here. So Daddy goes on an expedition and discovers the body of an Egyptian queen that looks exactly like his daughter. And so he decides to put a ruby ring from the dead queen's hand and gives it to his daughter for her birthday. Yeah, I definitely don't see nothing really bad that's going to come from all of this. Once Margaret has the ring, she feels a psychic link between her and the dead queen. Soon after, the rest of the expedition who took off with Tara's loot are killed off one by one. A mummy's curse, you say? We also get an introduction to a strange man by the name of Corbic, who Professor Fuchs is very leery of from the start. But Margaret can't shake off those charming features of Corbic. As the film comes to a close, it is revealed that Corbic is a disciple of Queen Tara and is attempting to transfer the spirit of his undead queen into the body of Margaret. Professor Fuchs intervenes to save his daughter, and in the end, Margaret kills the queen for good before having the house collapse on everyone. It's revealed that Margaret is the sole survivor from all of this, but as the film comes to a close, we get a tiny inkling that maybe Queen Tara did win after all. Overall, I find this film to be a very satisfying end to the Mummy franchise.
More chances for her to be reborn.
The production suffered many obstacles in the making of this film. Production was moved 2 months ahead of its scheduled time. Peter Cushing was originally cast as the role of the professor, but due to the death of his wife, he pulled out and was replaced with Andrew Keir. The film's original director, Seth Holt, passed away from a heart attack at age 47, only 5 weeks into production. It was up to Michael Carreras to pick up the pieces and finish production. Was this film suffering from a curse of its own? Maybe, but I'll let you guys figure that out. Final thoughts on this picture, so we do not overstay my welcome. Blood from the Mummy's Tomb borrows elements from previous Hammer mummy films without feeling unoriginal. Corbeck reminds me a lot of Adam Beauchamp from The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. The beginning of the film follows the same formula as the others, but thankfully switches gears from feeling like a monster movie to more of a supernatural chiller. The scene in which one of the expeditioners is in an insane asylum is one of my favorite set pieces. It's eerie and tense in its build-up, like Sam Raimi just grabbed a hold of the camera and started filming Evil Dead. Hammer really pulled out everything in this film to give us a great movie during a very dark period in the company's history. That's it for the Mummy franchise. 4 films, 3 of them I strongly encourage you to watch. When starting this project, I was walking in blind with only the knowledge known of the first film. But upon my discoveries and multiple viewings, I found these films to be fun and adventurous with a good amount of scares. It was after finishing this franchise that I realized that one of my childhood favorites must have taken inspiration from these films. Growing up on the Stephen Sommers Mummy movies as a kid, I saw the moments there. The fights on the boat, the mummy falling for the film's female lead, resurrections, and curses. While yes, Stephen Sommers' films were based on the Universal horror classics, I feel like this took a lot from Hammer's portrayal of the monster and the curse. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but it's funny seeing Hammer inspired by Universal and vice versa. A wheel of inspiration that doesn't feel dull or over repetitive. So look, film is a subjective medium. There are films that I've mentioned here that you probably liked or disliked, but to me personally, I feel like this was the best Hammer had to offer with its franchise. Looking at the Frankenstein and Dracula franchise films, you can see the quality of the films go down as more sequels are made. They didn't end with a good final film. Sure, they filled this need for shock, gore, and in a later years, sex, but I find there is a greater quality over quantity with The Mummy over the other 2 franchises. What did you think of the Mummy franchise from Hammer? Do you have a favorite film from this lineup? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you all next time as we look at the legacy of Hammer's Dracula. Thank you for watching.